Welcome, everybody, to the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Of course, I'm your host, Andrew Cooperrider. It's another amazing day here in the Commonwealth, and we are your source for state and local level political news, talk, all from a constitutional and conservative perspective. And we've got a bunch of stories to cover. Let me tell you, it's Pride season. That's right. Nationally, we see companies and government bodies paying their homage to this weird sexual cult that we have come to call the LGBTQIA plus percentage points, whatever, divided by community. But how are our local governments paying their respects this month, dedicated to whom is spending time with whom in their bedrooms? Well, we have a few stories we're going to talk about today regarding that. Richmond, of course, had their Pride Festival. Mount Sterling this weekend found itself having a drag brunch at a community center. And several local Lexington government groups pay their homage on social media. This year, Lexington Pride's been moved to the Rupp Arena, that area there, inside there, because they've outgrown their outdoors. That doesn't make too much sense. We're going to talk about that, why I think they're making a move there as well. I've got my speculations. Of course, this does leave the question, now that Pride's being moved inside, will Lexington do their annual anti-American swapping of our country flags for the Pride flags? That's right. For the past several years, Lexington has taken down American flags off poles and replaced them with Pride flags. Are they going to do it this year? What can you do to help stop it? We'll talk about that. Additionally, as well, Joe Gerth, the professional liberal mouthpiece for Kentucky Democrats, who has pretty much the most garbage take on anything, has gotten some pushback from Cameron after he writes an extremely racist op-ed where he makes the arguments that Republicans are still racist regardless of voting for Daniel Cameron. Gerth goes on to explain this article how you can only not be racist if you elect not just black politicians, but you got to elect black politicians with viewpoints that Gerth agrees with, a white liberal man. And then finally, we will talk about the possibility of the first transgender state house rep and how that will affect possibly for Beshear, and how that will really draw some conclusions, offer some opportunity for the Republicans in the state, certainly to illustrate just how far crazy left the Democrats here in Kentucky, the Democrat Party, and Andy Beshear have gotten. We have all that and much, much more here on today's show. You can follow me on Twitter at KY Cooperrider, on Facebook by simply following the page Andrew Cooperrider. You are listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for state and local level news, politics, and talk from a constitutional and conservative perspective. So, starting us off, Richmond has its Pride Festival. First off, these Pride Festivals, they're incredibly odd. After all, this is all about your sexuality. Essentially, it's a public display of who you are going to bed with. Something that is extremely strange. Something that, in a world, if you're going for a world where you want everybody to be accepting, quote unquote, of the LGBTQ people, you think the first thing you would do is stop throwing festivals for them. You would want them to be treated like everybody else. If you want to be treated like everybody else, you don't ask for special treatment, which is what these festivals are doing. And it's a sign of how far our society here has fallen. So in Richmond, they hosted their festival at the Irvin McDowell Park, a facility, of course, owned by the city of Richmond. And they had, of course, two of these very oxymoronically named, should be illegal, family-friendly drag shows. These should be illegal. I don't care who you are. You are kidding yourself if you do not believe drag shows are a sexual performance. You want to have your drag show at a venue where it's 18 and up and you're carding at the door, so be it. You do you. That's a private business. You're doing whatever you're going to do. But to have one of these out in the public at a public facility at the two of these, and to have them where children can see them, that is wrong. And drag shows are clearly sexual performance. I mean, literally, they shove dollar bills into these performers' clothing. There's only one other place where you do that. And it's at a gentleman's club, let's say. But they're more than just having some drag shows. They had some other notable things going on site there. One of them was they were offering marriages on site. If you had a marriage license, they had a person who could legally perform marriages on site, because nothing says, family friendly, building a family. And that's so funny too. These pride events are saying we're family friendly. Nothing says building a family like having an event dedicated to not being in a straight male-female relationship that is necessary in order to create children. But of course, they have their event where they're marrying people. You don't often see this. Of course, you have Vegas and things like that have this for quote-unquote straight people, but marriage is supposed to be a vow, and taking it so flippantly. We're like, hey, we've got a marriage person on site. Come get marriage. That just shows what they think about marriage, that it's not important. And of course, how can it be? I mean, you're making a promise before God to stay together. And if you don't believe in God, as many of these people do, they don't believe in God. A lot of these people are atheists, things like that. Well, the promise doesn't mean anything. You're not promising before anybody. It doesn't matter. But what's interesting too is let's talk about some of these sponsors of the Richmond Pride event. Of course, we have PetSmart. No real surprise there. Makes some sense, I guess, that PetSmart would have be sponsoring an event like this. After all, probably everybody there calls their dog their children and their fur baby. And I'm not trying to throw shade at anybody who calls their animals fur babies or children, but anybody who says that having a dog is exactly like having children has clearly never had a kid, and that comparison is silly. But anyways, U.S. Bank sponsoring them, and U.S. Bank, of course, very far left. ESG Bank, if I were you and I was banking at U.S. Bank, I'd move to a small local bank that more so represents your values. Planned Parenthood, once again, a little ironic considering ain't much reproduction generally going on between couples that are represented by Pride, once again. But anyways, the Bluegrass Army Depot, government installation, giving them money. Great. Another group here, the Kentucky Department for Public Health. That's right, a department funded by our tax dollars, giving money to the Richmond Pride so they can throw up their table there and sponsoring this kind of event. Our tax dollars, once again, funding far left ideas. You don't see them doing this at all for the conservative type beliefs, but of course, our tax dollars taken from us at force, being used to fund this kind of garbage through their sponsorships of this, through their vendors of this, Kentucky Department for Public Health, also as well, EKU Psychology Clinic, another government, of course, installation, the university there, public university, but it makes some sense that the psychology clinic would be there, considering probably half of their clients probably identify as LGBTQ. I'm just saying that's just the facts. You can get mad at me all you want to, but there's an awful lot of mental health issues going on there. Almost like if you somehow think you're a different gender, you're mentally ill. Funny how that works. And also as well, we have the Apostolics of Richmond, an LGBTQ affirming church. Of course, not much of a Christian church, obviously, or Bible following church, that must be. And then several SAFY and Benchmark Family Services, both foster care groups, setting up at these LGBTQ festivals, asking the question, stats show that there's waiting lists for these adoptions, but yet they're going after these LGBTQ couples. Raises a lot of questions. Finally, as well, we also have CASA sponsoring that as well. Long list of sponsors, a lot of questions to be asked about why are they giving money to these groups, especially if they're taxpayer-funded groups, as several of these are. But it's not just Richmond who's having these kinds of events in rural Kentucky. Over this next segment, we're going to be talking about that Mount Sterling drag show performance. And also we're going to talk a little bit about Lexington's upcoming Pride events. They're un-American, changing of the flag. But I thank you for getting back with us here at the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for state level and local level political news and talk from a constitutional and conservative perspective. Of course, I'm your host, Andrew Cooperrider. Let's dig into it. Mount Sterling has its drag show this past weekend, despite pushback from the community. This drag show billed as, G-rated, not necessarily, it's family friendly, says the producer. No, I'm not kidding. He literally states in this article here in the Herald Leader, when asked, like, hey, is this, because the pushback is regarding the concern about your community. This is being held at the Gateway Regional Arts Center. This is a local community arts center. And we're worried about this, and we're worried about children and people of our community, because here's the thing: live and let live. You do you, I'll do me, but don't harm children. And taking children, as I covered in our last segment, taking children to drag shows is child abuse. Those are sexual performances. That's what they are. You can't dress them up any other way. But of course, he says the drag show will be very G-rated performance, simulating sexual actions with movements, G-rated performance. It's not necessarily a family event, but it'd be fine if someone wanted their children to see it. There will be no nudity or sexual innuendo as these individuals literally dress up as sexualized fantasies of women. But putting that to the side, it's received some controversy. And this controversy is coming from some petition started by a private citizen. This gets real interesting here, okay? So this private citizen mother starts a petition to say, hey, this show needs to be stopped. It needs to be halted, and get the community to rise up and say, enough is enough. This has got to be stopped in our community. This does not represent our values. And so this petition starts going around. Well, this individual starts getting pushback on this petition and getting attacked in her job. What's her job? Well, happens to be the county treasurer. Now, is she doing this on the job? She says not. She's not doing it on the job. And Chris Haddix, the judge executive there of the county judge executive, the person in charge of the county state treasurer, says, hey, look, she's not doing this on the job either. I'm double checking that. This is her own private time. She's still a private citizen off the clock. She can still voice her political opinions on these items. Of course, this is naturally recognizing that this is a political speech by them, which gets interesting here in a second. But a former teacher there at the local schools who got pushed out because he felt discriminated against because, he was a gay teacher at public schools. My question would be, why does anybody know you're a gay teacher at public schools? Why are you talking about that stuff to the children? But anyways, and so he posts on Facebook, this Willie Carver individual. So this petition to stop our drag show is being given to area churches. Ignorance. We have a constitutional right to assemble. So this is meaningless, cruel, and stupid. And then he goes on to say that the county treasurer organizing against this is doing so illegally because she somehow is employed by the government and she might be using government funds. I mean, he's got no proof of that, but she might be using government funds to stop the drag show. So incredibly ironic. Why? Well, this drag show, once again being held at the Gateway Regional Arts Center, is receiving taxpayer funding. That's right. They're receiving money directly from the state in grants. They're receiving money from the Kentucky Council on the Arts, which is funded through our general fund. They are receiving your and my tax dollars. Once again, tax dollars taken from us by force. And if you don't think so, don't pay your taxes. See what happens. But taxpayer dollars being taken from us by force and then being used to push out this kind of garbage into our communities. They have no problem tax dollars being used to support their viewpoints, but they have a problem when they think, they don't even have proof. I have proof. I can show you the funding of this. I can show you where they're spending this money that's going to their website. You know where you can go? Just go to the Gateway Regional Arts Center website. Look at who their sponsors are. You're going to see the state logo. You're going to see the Kentucky Council on the Arts logo. Those are funded by our state legislature. Right now, what I would tell you to do, right now, call up your state legislature and say, defund the Kentucky Council on the Arts. This is not the only group they give money to that supports these kinds of far-left liberal views. The Kentucky Council on the Arts is funding an LGBTQ choir in Louisville. They're funding all kinds of far-left, whether it's the kind of critical race theory, LGBTQ stuff, or this kind of garbage all across the state. It shouldn't happen. And you know what? Apparently they agree with us, because if you're fighting back against this and you work for the government, or they think without any proof you might be using tax funds, it's a big problem to them to use that to fight against it. So it must mean going the other way. It has to. That's the other side of their belief. That's the other side of their statement, that using tax dollars then on the other side should be wrong. But yet that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing in this case. And it is just crazy to me that they don't see the hypocrisy in their own standpoints. Of course, that's not far to see. I mean, if the left didn't have a double standard, they'd have no standard at all, of course. We all know that. But it's interesting to see they can't even see their own hypocrisy here. But they say, look, we're having this no matter what. They say the end goal is that people who feel marginalized, or people who feel like they're in the shadows in their community, in rural communities, see that we did not back down. We did not back down to hate that they've experienced in their lives. Hate is now saying, look, you can't take my money from me and use it to fund this kind of stuff. Saying, look, you can't have children there. Nobody, you want to go have it at some brewery or gentleman's club somewhere. You like, once I said, carting at the door. That's not their issue. Their issue is you're having it at a taxpayer funded place, inviting in children. That's the issue. And you know what? If you want to subject children to this kind of sexualization, then I want you to feel marginalized. I don't want you to feel welcomed. I don't want you to feel like you have a place in society, because that is wrong, immoral, and it's destroying our future. It's destroying our youth. You be you. You go live your life, but stop harming people who can't defend themselves, who can't think for themselves. The very community that we as a society, children, we're supposed to take care of. We're supposed to make sure don't come to this kind of harm. We're supposed to make sure they grow up in a position to be successful in life. And this is not doing it. Taking them to drag shows so they can see people prance around as the opposite sex in sexualized performances. That isn't going to get that done. And then in Lexington, what do we have going on? Well, we've got that a Pride show coming up in Lexington, Pride event there. Normally that is held outside, but this time they're switching to inside. Why is that? Well, they've said they've outgrown the area, which seems kind of odd to outgrow the outside, but so you outgrow the outdoor, so you got to go inside. That's what they're saying. That is really, really odd, kind of. But anyways, putting that to the side, what do I think they're doing? I think a part of it might be is they're actually being pushed in that direction. This is just pure speculation on my point. They're being pushed in that speculation simply because, or pushed into that position, and I'm speculating that because, quite frankly, public displays that you see at a lot of these events is pretty awful. Now, I've never been to a drag festival, but I tell you what I have been to. A few years ago, I was watching the 4th of July parade in Lexington. Of course, the 4th of July parade in Lexington shortly follows the Pride Festival events, which is at the end of June in Lexington. And the Pride groups had to have their float in there. They had to have their opportunities to once again express themselves. They just had a whole month. But of course, they need to take over time where we are gathering to celebrate our country, to express who they go to bed with. And a person comes down the street, a guy comes down the street, and he's wearing, I have no better term for it, he's essentially wearing a thong. And I've got my 6-year-old, 7-year-old son at the time there. I don't want him seeing that. I have to cover his eyes. That's out in public. That's wrong. That should be indecent exposure to children. I'm not bringing my children around that. I don't want children exposed to that. I don't even want him to be able to expose his own children if he has any to that. Once again, wrong. But I think they're being pushed inside in order to help with that controversy. But there's another controversy that brews in Lexington around this event, and that is the mayor, as of several years ago, the mayor here has been ordering that our American flags across our city be taken down Now, of course, people threw a fit when he took down all of them. And so they compromised and said, or not people threw a fit, but they went to take down all of them, got a little pushback, so they compromised and only put up half of them. So in Kentucky, in Lexington, Kentucky, half the American flags get taken down on government buildings and then replaced with a gay pride flag. There is no situation where we should be taking down our American flags to fly the flag of something else, especially when, as we just covered, as they admitted, it's a political belief and standpoint. They're throwing a fit about tax dollars being used to fight back against these types of pride events or the possibility of it. Meanwhile, they have entire cities taking down American flags and putting up flags that represent their political ideologies. If you live in Lexington, call up the mayor's office right now. Tell your friends, your family, everybody. Call up the mayor's office and say, don't you dare replace one of our American flags with a rainbow flag. Will they still do it? Probably. But at least you stood up a little bit for the patriotism, stood up for what was right, and stood up for our country there for just a few minutes. For just a few minutes of your day, you can do that, and you can stand up for something great. And we're back talking about an article by Joe Gerth. For those of you who don't know who Joe Gerth is, you're very lucky. And it's unfortunate that I'm going to have to inform you who this horrible, terrible person is. Joseph Gerth is a political opinion writer for the Courier-Journal. And he wrote an article called, "Does the choice of Daniel Cameron for governor mean Kentucky Republicans aren't racist?" Gerth then proceeds to go into one of the most racist articles I've ever read. But of course, because he is a far left, liberal talking head, he will get a pass. There is no way they will hold him accountable for what he's said in here. The racist tropes and stereotypes that he postulates throughout this article, he'll get a pass. No big deal. You or I said that because we're conservative. Well, that would be considered awful. We'd be canceled. But Joe Gerth, he probably got a pay raise because the left, they love this kind of stuff. And let me tell you what I mean here. In this article, Joe is setting out a opinion that he believes that Cameron really isn't black. And least you think I am misrepresenting the article, let me read you this quote from the article. "The fact is, even though he is black, Cameron takes a stand against what the vast majority of black people believe." Now, you would expect if this was a halfway coherent and intelligent article, you would think they would go on to show a litany of examples of how Cameron doesn't represent what the majority of black people believe. But they don't. In fact, he goes into one stat, and here it is. In 2016, the Pew Research Center found that 87% of African Americans identified as Democrats, while only 7% said they were Republicans. That's it. That's the only point he makes of why Daniel Cameron doesn't agree with the vast majority of black people. Simply because he's not a registered Democrat. Somehow Cameron is different than all black people, simply because he's a registered Republican. And while he is different in that way, and I agree with that, that doesn't mean that he isn't black. But using that stat, using that argument, saying that, well, because Daniel Cameron is a registered Republican, he now doesn't represent black people, even though he himself is black. He then goes on to back that up and saying, look, they're only electing this guy because, well, they are still really racist and want to put a really good mask on it. So they're going to, so somehow Gerth's opinion is, and Gerth's putting forward, that Republicans are racist, and they're all racist, and they're only electing a black man because he simply makes them feel good. In fact, he quotes an article, another article the Courier-Journal had posted from Ricky Jones, and in that quote, he quotes him as saying, "Through Cameron, Kentucky can give the illusion of change without changing at all. It's white supremacy and blackface." That's what the Courier-Journal believes. They believe that, I'm sorry, not the Courier-Journal. This is an opinion piece. That is what Ricky Jones and then Gerth, by quoting him, believe is that simply by electing Cameron, they're giving the losing or change without change at all. It's white supremacy and blackface. Now, here's the thing. Republican beliefs that we don't care about race. That's it, period. We don't elect people based upon their skin color. That is a thought process that Republicans should adopt. Now, I know plenty of Republicans out there who actually, especially in liberal cities like Lexington and Louisville, that actually seem to throw that to the side. They actually want to elect people based upon their skin color. And what I mean by that is not white people. They want to elect, they want to elect minorities simply to somehow prove to people like Joe Gerth they're not racist. But of course, that's not enough for Gerth because, well, you can't just elect a black person with an R next to their name. They have to believe what Joe Gerth believes black people should think. Because, well, if you're not really electing a black person who's a registered D that has Democrat viewpoints, well, then all you're doing is just electing somebody to make you feel good. In fact, Gerth says in this article, in many ways, Cameron has made himself into the black man who doesn't scare white people and doesn't challenge them on issues of race. He doesn't see police brutality because it would harm him politically if he did. He opposes whatever he thinks critical race theory is because it's the latest Republican anti-black buzzword. See, Joe Gerth somehow has jumped into Cameron's head and somehow has decided that Cameron is only really saying these things. He doesn't see police brutality or he's against critical race theory because, well, it would just harm him politically if he did say anything bad. It's not simply put that Cameron is just against those things. It's not simply that Cameron philosophically believes that those issues are not what is facing maybe the black community's biggest issues, but it's not the country's biggest issues. It's not possible that he's against critical race theory just because it's wrong. He must be only against it because it would hurt him politically. Which, once again, this soft bigotry here of Gerth. I wouldn't even call it soft bigotry. This bigotry of Gerth to say that, well, you have to believe whatever Gerth says you have to believe if you're black. In fact, Gerth ends this article saying this. So no, the fact that Republicans were willing to nominate a black man for governor doesn't mean they aren't racist. It simply means they are willing to nominate a black man who acts as if racism doesn't exist because they think it's in their best interests to do so. Once again, you have no idea what Cameron thinks. You have no idea if he thinks racism doesn't exist because it's just in his best interest. Like, he's like, it definitely exists. And you know what? I agree. And all Republicans agree. Racism exists. We believe there are racist people. Like Joe Gerth. I believe he's a racist person. If you believe racism doesn't exist, well, you're wrong. Joe Gerth has proven it to you. It does because he's a dirty, dirty racist. But what we don't believe is that there's a such thing as this governmental racism. That country was founded on racism. It's absolutely racist. And if you don't create laws and policies that treat people differently based upon their skin color, then you're racist. Because that's what the left believes. They want policies that treat people differently based upon their skin color. They want our tax dollars allocated simply based upon people's skin color. They want opportunities afforded to people simply based on their skin color. That is what Republicans are against. We are against large government. We're against this idea that government can collect up all of our resources and make everything equal. That's what communism believes. That's a communistic idea. And a belief that everybody's implicitly biased, or a belief that the government is somehow institutionally racist, that is anti-Republican. So I'll tell you this. Republicans didn't elect a black guy. Republicans elected a guy who believes what Republicans believe. That believes that this country is a wonderful country, a place of opportunity. Who believes that it's not the government's place to try to somehow jump in there and level the playing field, whatever that means. We elected somebody, or it says, that they believe that everybody should be treated equally under our government and law. And in that way, it promulgates equal opportunities for everybody. Because the government can't be this all-seeing figure that makes sure everything's perfect. It's incapable of doing that. So Republicans didn't elect a black Republican. They elected a Republican who just happens to be black. But Gerth can't stand that. For see, Gerth has to focus on somebody's race. Because Gerth is, based upon simply what he stated here, clearly a racist, a first possible transgender state house representative coming out of Lexington's 93rd district. So this district was just recently won in 2022 by Representative Swan. He passed away recently. And what that does in Kentucky is that triggers the need for a special election. Now, if this occurs, if the vacancy occurs while the legislature is in session, then the leadership in the House or Senate get to call when that special election will be held. But if, however, it's outside of session, then Andy Beshear gets to, or the governor gets to call that special election. And then what occurs is a primary process that involves only the parties of those counties. So if the district passes over several counties, then that's a different story. But in this case, only the Lexington parties that meet. So the Fayette County Republican Party and the Fayette County Democrat Party will meet. Their voting members, however that party has structured the process, they will meet and somehow vote on who is to be the representative in this race. And it can be literally anybody can throw their hat in the ring, but the only people who get to vote are people who are active with their party. So if there's ever a reason for you to get active with your local Republican parties, it would be that when there is something like this, an unfortunate death, a vacancy, somebody quits, moves on, and this has happened a lot. I mean, you got Fayette County Clerk race, you got this race, Garrett County, probably looking at a county attorney special election coming up, or something along those lines. You have a county clerk's race down in, I believe, Lincoln County going on right now. Special election races occurring all across the state all the time. And most of the time they're called, like this one was, to be at the same time as another primary or general election, in this case the general election. And that is an opportunity. So that handful of people get to pick who will be on the ballot. That's a reason to get involved with your local parties. But putting that to the side, because you want to be able to vote on that, well, that means you got to be a member of the executive committees or county committees of your local parties. Putting that to the side. So if Emma Curtis, who is a transgender woman, so born a man, so Emma Curtis is running for this state house district. Emma Curtis is 26 years old. I guess went to Center College. Emma Curtis was an individual that testified quite a lot this year on different transgender bills, of course, against them, kind of an activist there. I actually have heard Emma's testimony before, and I thought Emma was in a band. I remember because when they were talking about the banning of drag shows, Emma Curtis came up and said, "Well, I'm a guy that dresses as a woman." I don't think he said that, but that's what they said. I'm a guy that dresses as a woman, but I'm just playing in a band. So if I'm just playing in a band, but because I'm not dressed as my biological sex, am I now taking part in a drag show? Did this bill take me out? That was Emma's concern. I remember seeing that. So activists up there, and I thought just a person who plays in a band. I never knew anything else this individual did, but I guess activist, band player, but has apparently gotten this nod, it looks like, from the party. Now, nothing's for sure. The Democrat Party of Fayette County can pick anybody they want to do this. Anybody who throws their hat in the ring, so far, Emma Curtis has thrown their hat in the ring. And the question becomes, how does this affect the governor's race? This race will be going on at the same time as the governor's race, and it'll actually be held on the same date. And this could be a major problem for the Democrats. In fact, there's even a lot of Democrats who are talking about how this can be a negative effect on the ticket. Why? Because the way this works is that when there's special elections going on, the Democrats and the Democrat nominees running at the same time are expected to, of course, show up and campaign with them. Now, do I think if Emmett Curtis gets the nomination from the Democrat Party, do they win that race? Most likely. I don't know who the Republicans are going to put up in that race exactly, but whoever it may be will end up having to run against this individual if they field a candidate even. They may not. It's Fayette County. It's a heavy D district. It may not be worth it with everything going on with the governor's race as well. It could be it's a very difficult race, but maybe it's such a turnoff to people that the craziness side of it, that it pushes some people out there. Who knows? But it could kill Beshear across the ticket because he's already being hit on these transgender issues. Some of the first attacks coming out against him, they're coming out during the primary process for governor. They were attacking Beshear for his vetoing of Senate Bill 150, a bill to ban transgender hormones and gender affirming care for minors, and talking about LGBTQ things in the schools. And Beshear vetoed that, and he's already been attacked for that. So this brings that issue to the forefront and becomes a huge issue. I mean, we're already seeing some organization attacking Representative Republican Timoney for his votes on those issues, saying his votes were the same as many of the Democrats out there. He received one of the lowest ratings, of course. And so they are putting out attacks on him too as well on that. This random group is. So the question becomes, does this become a really big liability for Beshear? I think it certainly does. Because he's got a choice. He can either campaign, because here's how it'll work. You have a transgender candidate. He will be expected to campaign with him. That will be expected. And if the Beshear campaign, when they're in Lexington, is not having the transgender Emma Curtis, if they end up getting the nominee as with him, if Beshear doesn't have Emma with him while he's in Lexington doing his campaign events, it will look really weird to all the Democrats. It will indicate that Beshear does think this is a liability. It's a catch-22 for Beshear. He is going to have to, while he's in Lexington, pulling Emma in on his events. He's going to have to. And the issue now becomes, does it highlight Beshear's craziness? I do think overall this is going to hurt him on the ticket. Look, there is not much. Polling's really clear on this. And while the liberal media and everybody else will push out all this stuff telling you that, no, you're wrong, you're bigoted, people don't think that, they don't believe that, blah, 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 blah. Well, they may push that out there. That isn't true. In fact, polling tells us some key facts. One thing is only 25% of Democrats think that minors should be allowed at drag shows. That's right. 75% of Democrats don't think minors should be at drag shows. 75% of Democrats. But yet this is exactly the kind of thing that Emma will be messaging on, that will be brought up, that they'll be facing attacks on, and Beshear in turn. So unless you're going to turn around and say something that literally Emma has been pushing against this entire legislative session, against bills banning children from going to drag shows, something that they won't even represent the majority of Democrats in that way. This transgender woman, this guy that thinks he's now a woman, will not even represent the majority of Democrats' viewpoints on these issues. And now you're going to have to saddle Beshear with that. That's why Democrats are losing grounds on these issues. That's why they stay away from them. This is a damaging issue. I have priorly stated that, and the Democrats got real mad at me for bringing up how Beshear supports these drag shows. Beshear's campaign won't host a drag show. You think he's going to go out here and campaign? But then it turns off this radical base that say, well, if y'all doesn't mean all, and that's what they say, y'all means all. If y'all doesn't mean all, then I'm not going to turn out and vote for him. Emma is putting Beshear in quite the pickle. I say more power to it. Put him in that pickle. We already know the Democrats most likely will pick this individual to represent them because, of course, they want to go with the farthest left, craziest representative that nobody agrees with, like nobody. So, of course, they're going to go with that, and they're going to be backing Beshear into this corner. Now, Emma's been asked about this. Emma claims that running on the ticket will elevate everybody. I am dubious to the claim. I think it spells disaster, but this is what the Democrat Party has to look forward to. Trying to win in rural states with far left candidates and ideas and being in a position where their base is so much farther left than what the general public is at there in rural states like Kentucky. Well, thank you all for joining us. This has been the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Be sure, tune in tomorrow, Tuesday. We'll have a great show for you then, too, as well. Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky and local level news and talk with a constitutional and conservative viewpoint. Y'all have a great day.